The Florida Everglades once teemed with life in a way that few places on Earth could match. Stretching across 1.5 million acres of wetlands, this slow-moving river of grass supported an astonishing web of creatures. Herons stalked shallow waters, deer grazed along hardwood hammocks, and the endangered Florida panther roamed freely through territories that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. The ecosystem functioned like a perfectly tuned machine, each species playing its part in a delicate balance that had evolved over millennia. Then, without warning, everything began to unravel. The trouble started quietly in the 1980s, when exotic pet owners began releasing Burmese pythons into the wild. These snakes, native to Southeast Asia, had become popular in the exotic animal trade. But as they grew to lengths of 15, 18, even 20 feet, owners found themselves unable to care for their massive pets. Rather than face the difficult decision of finding proper homes, many simply dumped their snakes into the Everglades. A single released python might have seemed harmless enough, but when Hurricane Andrew destroyed a reptile breeding facility in 1992, allowing hundreds more to escape into the surrounding swamps, the stage was set for an ecological catastrophe. What happened next shocked even the most experienced wildlife biologists. By the early 2000s, researchers began noticing something deeply wrong in the Everglades. Mammal populations that had thrived for centuries were crashing at an alarming rate. Studies revealed that raccoon sightings had dropped by 99% in python-infested areas. Marsh rabbits, once so common that visitors spotted them on nearly every airboat tour, had vanished almost entirely. Bobcat populations fell by nearly 90%, and white-tailed deer sightings plummeted by more than 94% in some regions. The pythons were consuming everything in their path. These snakes proved to be nearly unstoppable predators. With no natural enemies in Florida, a single adult python could consume prey as large as a 70-pound deer, digesting everything except fur and bone over the course of several weeks. Female pythons lay up to 100 eggs per clutch, meaning that a handful of released pets could explode into a population of tens of thousands within just a few years. By 2010, experts estimated that more than 100,000 pythons were slithering through South Florida swamps. The Everglades, a $31 billion ecosystem that provided drinking water, flood control, and tourism revenue for millions of Floridians, was being eaten alive from within. Florida's government scrambled to respond. In 2013, state officials launched the Python Challenge, a public hunting competition offering cash prizes to anyone who could capture and kill the invasive snakes. Hundreds of hunters signed up, eager to help save their home state's natural treasure. The following year, the state began paying professional trappers to hunt pythons year-round. By 2024, these contractors had removed over 23,000 snakes from the wild. The numbers sounded impressive until you did the math. 23,000 represented less than 1% of the estimated python population. For every snake removed, dozens more remained hidden in the sawgrass, breeding and feeding and spreading northward. Scientists tried everything they could think of. They trained detector dogs to sniff out pythons in the dense undergrowth. They deployed drones equipped with thermal cameras to spot snakes from above. They attached radio transmitters to captured pythons, hoping the snakes would lead them to breeding aggregations. They even developed robotic prey that mimicked the body heat and movement of rabbits, designed to attract and strike pythons so researchers could capture them. Nothing worked. The snakes always seemed one step ahead, adapting faster than humans could innovate. Then, in 2023, Florida wildlife officials announced a plan that seemed almost absurd on its face. They would release hundreds of eastern indigo snakes into the wild. The reaction was immediate and merciless. Social media exploded with jokes about Florida's famous eccentricity. Late-night comedians turned the announcement into punchlines. Environmental writers questioned whether the state had lost its collective mind. Fighting snakes with more snakes? What could possibly go wrong? Critics pointed to historical disasters, like Hawaii's mongoose introduction, where an attempt to control rats had instead decimated native bird populations. To the average person, Florida's plan sounded like the punchline to a joke about government incompetence. What the laughing public didn't understand was that the eastern indigo snake was no ordinary reptile. Growing up to 8 feet in length, With glossy blue-black scales that shimmered like oil on water, the indigo had earned its nickname as the Emperor of the Forest. Unlike the invasive pythons, indigos were native to Florida. They had evolved alongside the Everglades ecosystem for millions of years, filling a critical role that had been empty for decades. Indigos were immune to the venom of native rattlesnakes and cottonmouths. They hunted and consumed other snakes as a primary food source. In other words, they were nature's original snake killers. The tragedy of the eastern indigo snake was that it had nearly disappeared before anyone realized what was being lost. Throughout the 20th century, development had destroyed 97% of the longleaf pine forests that indigos called home. Gopher tortoises, whose burrows provided essential shelter for indigos, had been pushed to the brink of extinction by habitat loss and human persecution. During rattlesnake roundups, hunters pumped gasoline into tortoise burrows to drive out snakes, killing indigos along with their venomous cousins. By the 1970s, the eastern indigo had vanished from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Only small, isolated populations survived in southern Georgia and central Florida. In 1978, the federal government listed the species as threatened, but indigos possessed one extraordinary ability that made them invaluable. They ate snakes. Not just small snakes, but venomous rattlesnakes, aggressive cottonmouths, and even juvenile pythons. A single adult indigo could consume multiple snakes in a single meal, using its powerful jaws and crushing strength to subdue prey much larger than itself. Where indigos thrived, snake populations remained in check. Where they disappeared, ecosystems fell out of balance. Florida's plan wasn't about adding more snakes to a snake problem. It was about restoring a native predator that had been part of the solution for millions of years. The first results were nothing short of astonishing. In the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve, researchers released captive-bred indigos into carefully restored longleaf pine habitat. Within months, trail cameras captured images of indigos hunting and feeding. Then came the moment that made biologists weep with joy. In the autumn of 2023, researchers discovered wild-born indigo hatchlings, the first confirmed reproduction of the species in North Florida in nearly 50 years. The snakes weren't just surviving. They were thriving. They were breeding. They were reclaiming their ancestral territory. Even more remarkable were the reports coming from the python front lines. In December 2024, researchers tracking a 13-foot python named Loki found the snake dead, its head chewed off and hidden beneath pine needles. Trail cameras revealed the killer, a 25-pound bobcat, barely half the python's weight, had somehow taken down the invasive predator. Similar reports began emerging across the Everglades. Alligators were documented eating smaller pythons. Florida panthers were observed confronting the giant snakes. And most importantly, eastern indigos were discovered consuming juvenile pythons in the wild. The ecosystem was fighting back. Here is the truth that the laughing public failed to understand. Florida's plan was never about eliminating every single python. That goal, scientists now acknowledge, is almost certainly impossible. The snakes have spread too far, bred too successfully, and integrated too deeply into the landscape to ever be fully eradicated. But elimination was never the point. The point was balance. For millions of years, ecosystems have functioned through a simple principle. Predators control prey. Competition limits population growth, and diversity creates resilience. The python invasion shattered that balance by introducing a predator against which native species had no defense. But balance can be restored, not by killing every invader, but by rebuilding the natural systems that create stability. The eastern indigo snake is not a magic bullet. It is a piece of a larger puzzle, one that includes bobcats learning to hunt pythons, alligators rediscovering their role as apex predators, and humans stepping back to let nature do what nature does best. The people who laughed at Florida saw a state releasing snakes into a snake infestation. What they missed was something far more profound, a state acknowledging that human beings cannot simply bulldoze their way out of ecological crises. Sometimes the smartest solution is also the simplest. Restore what was lost, protect what remains, and trust that nature, given half a chance, will find its way back to balance. Today, the eastern indigo snake is reclaiming its throne, More than 500 indigos have been released across Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Wild reproduction is occurring regularly. The snakes are spreading into new territories, hunting invasive pythons, and restoring a balance the humans disrupted through carelessness and short-sightedness. The laughter has faded. In its place is something far more valuable, proof that even the most broken ecosystems can heal, if we are wise enough to let them.